Hi, everyone. Welcome to our panel for Asian American Pacific Islander Heritage Month. Thanks to the Asian Authors Alliance. I'm really looking forward to this evening because, authors always want to find out what editors and agents are thinking, right? So I have this amazing, amazing panel tonight, and I'm so thrilled to be able to spend time with all of them. They're going to introduce themselves to you now, and we're going to start with Jenny.
Hello, I'm Jenny Buck. I'm executive editor at Viking / Penguin Young Readers, and my pronouns are she, her.
And we have Rebecca.
Hi, I'm Rebecca Kuss. I'm a senior editor at Rick Riordan Presents and Disney Hyperion. I acquire YA and middle grade, and my pronouns are she, her.
And next we have Deeba.
Hi, my name is Deeba Zargarpur. I am an editor at Simon & Schuster Books for Young Readers and Salam Reads. My pronouns are she, her, and I acquire picture books, middle grade novels, young adult novels, and graphic novels.
And after 3 editors, we have our agent, Saba.
Hi, everyone. My name is Saba Sulaiman. I'm an agent at Talcott Notch Literary. I work in kidlit and adult fiction and nonfiction, and my pronouns are she, her.
Thank you all. I have my first manuscript was accepted in 1997 and published in 1999. So I have been around a long time. I'm always amazed just to sometimes be on panels with people who said, I read your books when I was little. And I have to say that it's a huge thrill for me because when I first broke in, it would have been very difficult to put together a panel like this. So I am thrilled to see you all here. And there are more of you out there, agents, editors, people in publishing who are people of color and from other marginalized communities. One thing that interests me, and it's not just for people of color, but almost anybody, and people of color, of course, or other marginalized identities have that layer on top of it, which is you don't go into like a 5th grade classroom and have someone say, oh, I want to be in sales and marketing for a publisher. Okay, I mean, that's just not, it's not a job ambition or a career ambition that most kids have, right? They don't even know that those kinds of jobs exist. I mean, I didn't know they existed for a very long time. So what I'd like to do now is I'd love to hear about your own personal journey to, how you got to where you are now. Start as far back as you like. And so let's have our agent first. Let's have Saba.
Sure. I have to say, I'm meeting more and more younger editors and agents who actually have a story where they say that when I was 12, I knew I wanted to be in publishing and I wanted to be an editor or in publicity or something very specific. And a part of me is jealous. I'd admit, a big part of me is jealous. But the other part of me is so grateful that is now something that so many people, especially people of color, feel like they can even identify as something they can do, and that exists at all. Because I certainly did not have any idea. I mean, it feels very naive of me to say this, but I guess maybe it was how I was raised, but I was raised in South Asia where I assumed you were either a doctor or an engineer. And, I just didn't know many grown-ups who weren't or had their own business who did anything beyond those 3 things. And it's weird because I would read a lot and I loved reading and I would read about, astronauts and scientists and even book publishers. But it's one of those things where, if you don't see role models around you, it doesn't even occur to you that it's not fantasy, right? So I definitely had a very circuitous path into publishing. I thought I would basically go into academia because I always knew I loved to read and write. And I was like, well, if you're bookish, I guess there's being a professor. So I was on track to do my PhD. And then when I realized that's actually not what I wanted to do, I had sort of a career crisis moment. And I went to our career office and I was like, what do I do with my life? I don't know if my parents would be okay with this. And they were like, well, what can you do? I was like, I can read and write, and that's about it. And they said, okay, well, I guess publishing, journalism. So I actually tried both. And then I was really lucky that I got my first internship at Source Books. And I interned at their romance imprint, Casablanca, and it was a really amazing experience. It was one of those like light bulb moments of this is exactly what I've always wanted to do. I've always loved critiquing my friends' papers just for fun. Like I would like help them edit their essays, and just the process of going behind writing and refining it, and I just loved it. And I was even a writing tutor in college. I mean, these all, again, I look back and I really wonder why I didn't have this eureka moment earlier, but it came when it came, and one thing led to another, and I started interning at my current agency, and I realized agenting was a really great fit for me, personality-wise, career-wise, lifestyle-wise. I loved/love, because it's the same agency, I'm still there. My boss, who is my mentor, I love her so much. She has taught me so much about what it means to be a good professional, a good publishing professional, and a good human being, and the rest is history.
I heard a couple things there. I heard internship and mentoring. I think those are becoming really important parts of what we need to do to keep this going. Rebecca, can you tell us about your path?
Yeah, absolutely. My very first job in publishing was in 5th grade when my friends would pay me $1 to write Hanson fan fiction, and I would put their names in it. And so that's where I got my start in this industry. But really, similar to Saba, I was in college. I was pre-med because I thought that was pretty much the only choice there was. I was miserable at the time. And then I graduated in 2009, which was pretty much the height of the recession, and there were no jobs, right, to be had. And I knew that I didn't want to go to med school. I had failed organic chemistry like 3 times, so I knew there was no way I was going to get into med school. So a lot of my friends were going to teach English abroad, and my mom, who was born and raised in Korea, had a lot of family there, and all of my aunts, and she has 9 brothers and sisters, and so I have a lot of cousins in Korea. They were like, just come to Korea for a year. We'll have the best time. You'll like teach, and then on the weekends we'll just, be together and just have fun. So I did that, and I packed a suitcase. I was teaching in an all-girls high school, and I packed a suitcase just full of books, all the books that I loved as a kid, and I spent a year just like reading everything from Harry Potter to Gossip Girl to just what else? I'm like looking at my bookshelf, Meg Cabot, with all of these Korean teenage girls, and they loved it. They ate up like all of these American books, and it was the best year. And so when I got back, I realized like, oh, that was the best part of my year. I should try to make this a career. And so I got a job in a used bookstore, which was an amazing experience. Just hand selling, I think, is experience that everyone in publishing should have. I recall it so much. I use it daily. I did so many unpaid internships. I was in Boston at the time, so MIT Press, Hachette has offices there, just anywhere that would hire me. And then I got my first job in the industry at Candlewick. I was their sales and marketing services assistant, which basically meant that I did a lot of in-house stuff for sales and marketing. So putting together launch materials and things like that. And I knew I wanted to break in to editorial, like so many of us. I had that dream. But first I knew that I wanted to just dedicate myself to learning about children's books more. And so I got a master's at the University of Pennsylvania. I studied under Dr. Ebony Thomas, who is incredible. If you don't know her, I highly recommend following her on Twitter. She's wonderful. She taught me everything I know about children's books and critical race theory. And when I graduated, she was the one who just went above and beyond and helped me network with every single person that she knew in publishing, and eventually led to my next and my biggest job as of then in the industry, which was working as a scout at Maria B. Campbell Associates, where I scouted for international publishers as well as Netflix, which was great fun.
Wow. What a lot of experience. I mean, that's amazing, right?
I've had a very roundabout experience, I think. And I think it's something that a lot of people of color and women of color, especially in this industry, when you talk to them and you hear their stories, you realize that not a lot of us came up in a very traditional way, starting as editorial assistants and then moving up. I think a lot of us have kind of a more circuitous route to where we are right now, which I think really actually helps us and gives us kind of a well-rounded and kind of diverse perspective in terms of what we're doing now as editors and agents.
Deeba, could you tell us about your journey?
Sure. Following the theme of non-traditional, I also, growing up, I never knew that publishing was an industry, being an editor was possible, even really being a writer to be possible. You know, I grew up, I'm first-gen American, so my entire family, they immigrated from Afghanistan in the early 80s, and they came to America, and, you know, they had come during a time of great political upheaval, you know, a lot of instability. And so when they settled to have a life here in America, I think my parents and a lot of my family members really wanted to push their children towards career stability. So they wanted to push us more towards, you know, traditional careers that guaranteed job security, that were just well respected, well known. So I only really had, you know, two options. So to be a doctor or be a lawyer. So I was, much like Rebecca had said, I was pre-med. I decided that I wanted to be a doctor just because those were my only two options. And I didn't find myself to be a very argumentative person, or I was really quiet as a child. So I was like, I guess I could be a doctor. But, you know, during my time in university and going through my classes, what I noticed really was that I was struggling a lot in my science classes, and I was struggling a lot just to really even finish college, mainly because the material that I was going through, you know, once you get to organic chemistry, you're kind of like, oh man, like, what am I doing here? But I felt like there was something wrong with me. Like, why was this material seeming not interesting? I wasn't grasping it. You know, why am I not finishing my degree? You know, I took a pretty roundabout way just trying to figure out exactly what it is that I had wanted, you know, out of my education and really out of my life. You know, what was I going to do after university, and just struggling to even get a bachelor's, and really feeling like this is taking me such a long time. I can't imagine dedicating another 4 years of my life into medical school, kind of in this road where I'm just miserable all of the time. So while kind of doing that soul searching, kind of to help me figure that out, I started, you know, writing in a notebook. I started doodling, and I started just kind of telling stories, just to kind of get my mind off of the existential crisis I was having, where I was 23, you know, that's like expiration. You should have your bachelor's already. You should already be in medical school. I was still an undergrad, and really kind of feeling like a huge failure at that point in time. And what I really had was stories and just writing. And there was a moment where I was like, well, you know, I like stories, and I've always liked writing. You know, I was that kid in middle school in the lockers. I don't know if they still have them now, but I used to like draw comics and create little stories and put a page a day like on my locker, and my friends would like look at the page a day and be like, oh, like every day, like during the school year, they'd see the story, and I thought, well, maybe, you know, this would be an interesting thing to do. So I started interning at literary agencies, actually, as being an agent's reader. So I'd go into an agent's inbox and read their slush. And I thought, this is great. I love to read. I love stories, and I get to do it for free. But I mean, I was reading for free anyways. So I thought, like, this is fun. And through kind of, you know, talking with agents and going through their inboxes and really realizing more about the industry, and actually there's so much more to publishing than just the finished book, because I didn't know that, you know, past the product, you know, there was an entire process behind it. I just thought they magically appeared and here's the book in your bookstore, the end. And once I realized that actually, you know, there are publishers, real places that have editors that also read books and work on books, I thought, well, maybe that's something that I would be very passionate about, since I enjoyed going into an agent's slush inbox, but it wasn't quite where the role that I felt fit for me. So basically what ended up happening is like, okay, well, I don't have, you know, a degree in English. I didn't get an MFA. I don't have any into this industry. So how am I don't live in New York. I don't live close to New York. How am I going to get into this industry? And so what I found was Twitter. There was a posting online. An editor was like, I need an assistant. And I was like, you know what? I'm gonna go for it. I DM'd and was like, I don't live in New York. She was like, doesn't matter. And I said, okay. And I sent in my application, and I didn't think I would get it. But after 3 interviews, I had gotten it, and they were like, as long as you can make it into the office, it's yours. And that's kind of how I started as an editorial assistant. And I, did the 2.5 hour commute every day. I was living in Philly, and the job was in New York. They're like, if you can be here at 9 o'clock, we don't have a problem where you live. So that's kind of what I did. And that's how I started.
Wow, that's amazing. And by the way, if there are any agencies or publishers listening now, times have changed since these women broke in, and now we want all internships to be paid. Okay, I think the era of the unpaid internship should be over. Okay, Jenny.
Hi. Well, I feel like we're part of a club because I'm also a victim of organic chemistry as somebody who was pre-med my first semester freshman year, after my parents pressured me to be pre-med. But that, my grades that first semester in all of those science and math classes just proved that it was not the path for me. So I was just like, screw it, I'm just gonna do what I want to do. So I just signed up for English classes and changed my major. My path to publishing was a lot more linear, I think. Maybe I'm dating myself, but things were just, there was like more of a sort of clear stepping stone path to publishing back in those days. I had an internship at Charlesbridge when I was a senior in college. It was unpaid. And that led to, through connections, it led to my first job in publishing, which was at Highlights for Children. And I had only ever lived in big cities. Like, my college was in Boston. I was from New York. So I had to move to rural Pennsylvania for this job, and it was quite an eye-opening experience. It was scary for me as, a young girl living on my own for the first time, like at least 2 hours away from any sort of major city, which was the setting that I was really used to. There were cows, it was just pure countryside. But I learned a lot because I was the only other editorial person in my department besides my boss. So I basically had to do a lot, almost everything towards the end of my year there. But when my year was up, they offered me an extension, but I just decided to go back to New York where I just felt more comfortable. And looking back at that, young girl that I was actually, I'm pretty proud that I took that step to do it, because I'm not sure I would want to do it now, but I learned a lot, and I was able to take a lot of those skills and knowledge to New York, where I worked at one publishing company after another. Now I'm at Penguin, where I've worked twice before, so a lot of things come full circle. And actually, at this point, I'm not sure how many publishing companies will be left after all the acquisitions, but I'm at Viking, where I'm very happy now. But yeah, it took a long time to get to where I am. There were a couple of blips during my career where I stopped working, and I just asked myself, is this what I really want to do? Is there something else that I could do? But when you've committed like a certain number of years to doing one thing, it's, the pathways start, narrowing, and you really, your options get limited. But fortunately, I determined on my own that this is something that I wanted to do. So I'm happy doing it. There's a lot of reading. It's a lot of hard work because, time is precious, and there's a lot of great books out there to read, but I'm really happy I ended up where I am now.
That's great. So am I. I'm really glad you ended up where you are now too. I think it's one of the things I think about a lot is the folly of asking 17 and 18-year-olds to choose their life path. Sometimes it takes some of us longer. I often, when I'm speaking to writing groups, I tell them that I started my first novel when I was in my late 30s. wasn't one who was, knew what I wanted to do and began writing books when I was 15 or 20 even, and so, and, we live longer these days, we work longer. And it just seems to me that I wish there were some kind of structure where people who need it can take a look. Also keep talking. Okay. Are you all back with me? Am I frozen?
Yes,
Okay.
you're now fine. Yeah.
Okay, right. For a while I was breaking up. Okay. Okay, sorry about that. Within my career of 20 plus years now, I've seen a lot of changes, many of them, for the good. Once again, being able to put together a panel like this, which I wouldn't have been able to do at the start of my career. And I want this panel to be both positive and realistic. It's still not a picnic out there. It's still not like, we can stop working so hard because we're there. I don't feel that in any way, and I'm sure that the same is true for all of you. But I would love to hear what I call a story about eventual triumph. That's what I call them, where you had to work to overcome something or other, a particular manuscript or a particular procedure in your offices or a hire, something like that, where you may have had to do some convincing, and that's what we have to do when we're the first or the only or one of the very few in the workspaces where we are, right? We do a lot of persuading, each in our own ways. So if you have what I call an eventual triumph anecdote or story, would you like to share it? Because I'd love to hear it. So
yeah, I can share.
Great.
I was actually thinking about it a lot, what story I could share. And I think, so my first job at a Big Five publisher, I was an editor at Inkyard, which is a YA middle grade imprint under Harlequin and also part of HarperCollins. And when I first started that job, I was building my own list and it was really exciting. And every day reading submissions was like a brand new adventure. But I soon learned that just because you love a book does not mean that that book will become yours. And the auction process was very brutal. I think that in the first year, I lost over 20 in a row, and it was tough. And I remember there was one week last summer, and a lot of other editors in the industry will know this week, but it was late July or early August when it felt like every single book was going to auction in 1 week, and I lost 5 auctions in 1 week. And it was the worst week of my life. My boss felt so bad that she asked me what my favorite snack was, and I told her Cheetos, and she sent me a gigantic box full of bags of Cheetos to my apartment. My husband was like, "What is this?" It was very nice, but it was just brutal. And then this book came in that I loved so much. It was by a Korean author. It was a Korean rom-com, and I read it, and it just spoke to my soul, and I just knew that I couldn't lose it, and I won it. It was the very first auction that I won, and the fact that it was for a Korean story just made it that much better. And it's going to be published. You'll all be able to read it someday, and it just makes me so happy every time I think about it.
Oh, that's wonderful. I love that story, and I can't wait. You'll have to start dropping little hints for us sooner or later.
It's been announced. It is, I'm sure she won't mind me telling you this. It is Soulmates by Susan Lee. It is coming out fall of next year, I'm pretty sure, but it's going to be amazing. Yeah, it's going to be great.
Oh, that's awesome. Yay. Would anybody else like to share a story like that?
Sure, I can go next. Also thought about what I should share. And I think for me, similar to Rebecca, I think one of the most difficult things about this industry, and there's lots of difficult things, is the curve is very steep of feeling like you've gotten your footing, whether it's financial or even just your list getting kicked off. It just feels like You're waiting for a really long time. You're making offers on authors who are all going with the better, bigger, better, more famous agent. It's like the same thing, but for agenting, I guess, the auction situation that you were in. But I lost so many of those beauty contests. And I understand why, obviously, because, when you have so much to prove and not much of a record, it's difficult. So you just keep trying, you keep going back, you keep reading, you keep hoping. And I got the submission for a book that is now really well published by Salam Reads, actually. It's called Muslim Girls Rise by Sarah Mir. I got it in my inbox, and I kid you not, I was just back from maternity leave, and my first instinct was, this is so good. They're never going with me. It's just not gonna. I mean, why should I even bother? Like, that's how I felt. And I was talking to my sister about this, and she's always like, you're such a negative Nancy, or the equivalent of that in Urdu. Like, why? Just go for it. Like, go for it if you love it. And I was like, fine, I'll do it. And I know my heart's gonna break, but I'll do it anyway. So I read it, and I got on the phone with her, and she was so wonderful and warm. We had this great conversation. And at the end of it, she was like, all right, so let's get started. And I was like, wait, what? And she was like, yeah, I really like you. This is going to work. I feel it. Like, I have a really good feeling about you and us. And I was like, aren't you going to let the other agents? And I usually tell all authors who speak with me, even when they have this, but now that I've been in this position multiple times, I'm like, you should go back to everyone else you've queried and let them know that you have an offer, and give yourself the chance to make a decision that's a bit more studied, and ask for advice. And she was like, that's good advice. I guess I'll get back to you. And then she emailed me the next day. She was like, I want to work with you. I just thought, 24 hours. It's good advice. So I took it, but I knew I was going to go with you. And I was just like, so that was the first time that's ever happened to me. Right. And I was just so shocked. And of course, it ended up going for auction when I put it on sub, and my first auction, my first picture book sale. It's such a meaningful book because it's a book of anthologies of 21st century feminist women, Muslim women in all spheres of life. And it meant so much to me, not just because it was the first of many milestones in my career. It's just, this book is so special. So when it happened, I was like, I guess I should stick around. I guess I can do this, So, yeah.
Jenny,
someone believed in me. Oh.
I could listen to these stories all night. I'm telling you, it's such a lift. Jenny, do you have one for us?
Yeah, I was thinking about this a lot, and one of the stories that sort of sticks out in my mind. I had acquired a book. It was a queer Asian fantasy called Girls of Paper and Fire, and it's just like this gorgeously written fantasy novel. And time came for us to talk about the cover. And from encounters I had before in my publishing career, I was nervous because I really wanted to have an Asian girl's face on the cover. Like, it was important to the story. There were other directions we could have gone with it, having like symbols or icons, or not showing the face, or focusing more on the setting. But it was something that was important to me. I had a great art director that I was working with, and we were given a whole bunch of concepts, but the one that really stuck out to me was the one that eventually ended up on the cover. I wish I had a copy of the book, but I am unpacking, so I don't have it. But you should go look at it because it's really beautiful. And there was like a big Asian girl's face on the cover, and I just felt like it worked, perfectly. It was something that I was nervous to bring to, the rest of the team, but my fears were, not grounded in anything except my prior experience, because when we did eventually show it to the team, everyone loved it. It was so like undeniably gorgeous. In the end, there were plenty of accolades for that cover. I was really glad to see it just everywhere that year. So that just felt like a triumph for me, for the author, Natasha Nyan, and just for Asian girls everywhere. Like, I didn't have any books like that when I was young. So seeing this beautiful face on the cover just felt like a win.
It is. It's so important, right? I mean, I'm glad we seem to be getting past that trend where the girls' heads cut off, on every cover. What was that? So anyhow, Deeba, your turn if you'd like to share.
Sure. This was a tough one too. I was trying to think of what my example would be. But basically, with my roundabout way into editorial and acquisitions, I've been fairly new to acquiring. So I've only been acquiring for about 1.5 years now, which feels like just yesterday, but also like 10 years in a pandemic. But when I first started at Simon & Schuster, one of the very first acquisitions, not acquisitions, but submissions that I had gotten in my inbox was this picture book. And it was my very first time adding picture books to my repertoire. I was like, sure, I can do this. I can try picture books. And it was a wordless picture book. And the concept, there was something not quite right, but I really was drawn to the creator. And she's an Iranian, and she lives outside of the United States. And there was just something about the setting in her picture book that just really resonated with me. And I couldn't quite reject the picture book yet, because I just was like, the concept's not there, but I'm not sure. But there's something about this that I'm just really visually interested in this, and I'm not sure. And I had expressed the sentiment, and with a few colleagues, and they were like, it seems the art's really nice, but it seems a little underdeveloped, or we're not quite sure. And a few months went by, and I was thinking on it, and in my mind, growing up, I had never really seen myself represented in stories before. And even though I'm not Iranian, but I'm Afghan, but we do share similar cultures, and we do share a language. And there was just something really special about this creator that I couldn't let go of. So I had reached out to her, and we really just connected and talked about this story and the ideas that I had of, I really want to bring on creators that, don't live in the United States, and that, bring a wider perspective to Western media. And, I want to do something in an Iranian bathhouse. And I think you're the right person to do this, but, I want to come up with a concept with you. And what ended up happening was we ended up, talking about things that were important to us. And, for what we shared was, we share a holiday called Nowruz, which is essentially it's called the Persian New Year. And it's usually the first day of spring. And through our conversation, we kind of crafted this beautiful story of, the day before Nowruz in this beautiful, gorgeous bathhouse, and wrapped up in this really cute and fun mystery of something is causing a mess, and what could it be, and infusing just a lot of the mythology and the creatures that we both grew up with into this really lovely text. And after we had basically polished up the pages and everything, and then it was time to kind of share. So we have to bring to our larger teams. And there was this anxiety that I had before presenting, like in front of everybody, because you present in front of everyone, the president, all the marketing departments, sales, publicity, everyone. And I don't know if this is just something that was embedded in me in childhood of who would want to hear our stories and who would really be interested in this sort of a concept. And so there was a nervousness of, would anyone get it? Would anyone understand like the joy that the day before Nowruz brings, for children who celebrate, and, the monsters that hide, and the mythology. And there was that uncertainty of, I'd present and the team would be like, but we don't quite get it. And I think the triumph really was when I presented that the team did get it. And I think they had felt my passion, and they had felt my enthusiasm, and really what it meant to me, the different elements in this picture book, and how important it was to kind of have this material out there, for kids who don't see themselves represented, or not see their holidays represented. And so I guess the eventual triumph is really just the surprise that I didn't meet resistance, and I think that was refreshing.
Oh, I think that's awesome. I also loved the line, I really wanted a story set in an Iranian bathhouse. Okay, I mean, this is not, this is the importance of having inclusive publishing staffs, right? So I had asked you all to think about in advance a book you loved from childhood, and also about your manuscript wish lists, you know, the kind of stories that you wish would cross your desk. So I'm going to do a little twist now and ask you to tell us about a favorite childhood book, name the title, and if that influences what your wish list is today. Maybe the answer is no. You know, maybe you're only acquiring YA and the book of your childhood was a picture book, and that's cool. But I'm just wondering if, you know, those chords stay with us, you know, all through, you know, and resonate all through our, I know they do for writers. I mean, I'm forever trying to write the kind of book I loved when I was a kid. And I'm wondering if that's true for you all as readers and publishing professionals as well. So let's see, who have we not started with yet? Rebecca, first a book from your childhood, and then does it influence your manuscript wish list today?
So my favorite book from childhood is The Princess Diaries by Meg Cabot. And 100%, I could basically just say The Princess Diaries, but centering BIPOC characters as my manuscript wish list. It's basically what it is. I think all of my favorite books have a little bit of that. Tokyo Ever After, which I just read, which just came out, feels just like The Princess Diaries, but kind of centering a Japanese American girl. So yeah, I would say yes, very much.
I love that. I love that. So, Deeba, you kind of touched on it already. It was your answer that was making me think that. But
what did I read when I was younger? So I was the kid that read a lot of manga, so I didn't read a lot of books. I thought I was going to be like an artist one day, and no, like that talent did not emerge. But when I was a kid, the books that I really got hooked on was really A Series of Unfortunate Events by Lemony Snicket. I loved those books. I also loved anything scary in my childhood. I loved things that I wanted to be scared. I was like, bring it on, like, Goosebumps, whatever. TV shows like Are You Afraid of the Dark? Like I wanted to see like the challenge of like, I'm not afraid of anything. Let's see if these books unsettle me. Which some did, I'll say. But does that influence my taste now? I do love spooky things. Mm-hmm. For sure. I think that's always stayed with me. And I think part of that unsettledness is I really enjoy stories that kind of explore maybe complicated situations in life or complicated relationships, complicated families, things that probably reflected a little bit more of my upbringing. But in addition to that, lately, what I've really, really been interested in is really just fairy tales and folk tales, like Once Upon a Times that are like classic to you, but not to a Western audience. I think is something that I've gravitated more towards as an editor now. Like now I really read to escape. I don't really read to be scared. It's too much. The world is pretty scary. And I think there's something that feels safe about a fairy tale that's special to you, that's burrowed in your heart from your culture that, makes me want to know more, about it. I want to escape there. I want to go to that safe place that's filled with the glow of who you are and your people and your culture. And I'd love to make those stories, the classics here, because I think we've heard a lot of Cinderella and we've heard a lot of Sleeping Beauty. And I think there's just so many more stories out there. And I think that's kind of what I'm looking for now.
It's beautiful. Thank you. Jenny.
This is an easy one for me. One of the books that I loved from my childhood was The Westing Game by Alan Raskin. I just love the way, it was so smartly put together. It was so clever the way Alan, came up with these clues and spread them all so organically in the book that you didn't even know that a puzzle was happening until sort of the end, and it all sort of came together in such a great, satisfying way. If I were to read it now, I imagine, because there were 3 Chinese characters, I do remember that there were some, very problematic depictions of them, especially the wife. And I think that there might have been some attempt to have the James, who was like an adult dad, trying to turn his friends' racism against themselves a little bit in the way he was operating his restaurant and speaking to them. But it really probably needs another look in terms of ways it could be improved. But I do remember reading about Doug, who was he was in high school and he was a track star. It was one of the first depictions, I think, of an Asian character that probably busted a lot of those stereotypes. I mean, he was a runner. He didn't like to study. He was so confident. He ran around calling himself number 1 all the time. He ended up being like an Olympic athlete and a sportscaster, and girls had crushes on him. It just kind of spoke to me in a way that it was just really refreshing to see a character that was just so different from what I had seen before, and even what my own parents probably wanted for me. So that kind of stuck with me, and it's something, that book is something that I cite whenever I speak to agents about what I'm looking for too. Not the problematic stuff, but just the sort of really smart puzzle story that it was.
They're so hard to do. And you can see that, but we still use that book as that's the puzzle book,
Yeah.
that so do well. Yeah. I know
I've never seen its equal.
Right. Saba, do you have a childhood favorite? Uh-oh, is Saba muted? Okay.
Sorry. All right.
Okay.
I always get really stumped by this question because I was one of those kids who read everything in the library just because books were everything. I read, and I grew up all over South Asia, so in Sri Lanka, in Bangladesh, in Pakistan. And so we get a lot of British writers and their books. So I grew up on Enid Blyton, and and then we had all of the sort of the Judy Blooms, and then there was Tintin comics, and then there were just lots and lots of books. And I was thinking about your question, and I feel like I can point to one thing about each series that I still love a lot, that I want to see in the books that I want. For example, I also love Roald Dahl, not the problematic parts, but I love that when he writes to children, he treats them like adults, right? He doesn't pander to them. He treats all of his characters like Matilda or like the other kids. They're not sort of vehicles for discovery. They have their own personalities, and they're shaping their own narratives. And I love that about his books, other than the kooky, weird, off-kilter humor and just the bizarro stuff. I love that. I grew up on Sweet Valley, all the kids, Hi, Twins, all of that, the whole thing. I read every single book that was in the library. And it's just so very, I love relationship stories. Kid, like teenager. Of course, I was obsessed with twins. I always wish I had one, and I'm glad I don't. I think I wouldn't handle that well as an adult. But just I love contemporary YA and contemporary middle grade, where it's just I have a problem in my life that feels like it's the end of the world, and it's really just not. But that kind of thing. I love those stories. But I was thinking about if I had to pick one book. My favorite book, I would say, the one that I returned to as I grew older, even beyond picture book stage, I kept reading it because I loved it so much, was The Velveteen Rabbit by Marjorie Williams.
Oh.
It's just a book that when I read for the very first time, it made me cry. And I was really young, and I didn't know that books could do that. I didn't know that I could feel that way. I could be moved with words, And it also made me realize that the things around you, and I'm not sure if you're all familiar with the story, but it's about a little boy, I believe, who has a toy, a very beloved toy that he basically ends up forgetting. And then the toy basically the concept behind the book is that the toy becomes real with love. And it's just this idea that the things around you have their own stories. The people around you, they have their own histories and stories. And then, it's just, I love so much about that book. It just makes me like tear up even thinking about it. I shared it for the first time with my daughter, who is 5 now. And I read it to her and she looked at me and she was like, I understand why you like this book so much. It's really good. Like, yeah, so that book, I think, because it, again, it's full of wisdom, it's full of love, and it's full of this idea of a child realizing that life isn't as easy as it's supposed to. It's as everyone kind of passes it off to be. Is actually, it's like, I love books, especially in kidlit, where the child at some level at the end of the novel has grown up just a little bit, and doesn't necessarily have to be cynical. It's just a feeling of, yeah, that thing I thought that was just easy or something I could handle wasn't, but I think I'll be okay though. That kind of feeling. I love that feeling, and I want that feeling. For me, that's the experience of growing up, really, right? So, yeah.
Well, I think what I'm getting here, which is something that we know, is that people like different books, and they have different reading histories, and they have different experiences. Even in an all Asian panel, you all like different things. And I've always said that it might be partly sour grapes, but when I hear about someone who doesn't like a book of mine, or it gets a bad review, or you happen to lose your sense of control and go on to Goodreads for some reason, and I try to tell people who are early in their careers, when people don't like your books, it's actually a good thing. Of course, you wish everyone would like your books, but it's a good thing that we like all different books. That none of it. What a boring world it would be if everybody liked the same books. How could I possibly get published if every editor always liked the same kind of book, and it didn't happen to be the kind that I like or that I write? So that comes with the cost of sometimes people not liking the books that you write or agent or publish. Sometimes that happens. So, all right, in the question comments, we're getting one sort of theme, which is next steps in publishing. I mean, once again, this great panel that we're having, that we're able to have now. I had written, yes. So what? One of the questions that I had sent you ahead of time was related to this. If you had a magic wand and could wave your wand and produce some big systemic change in publishing, one of my gripes at the moment is that publishing is still thinking in numbers. Oh, my list has 5 books by BIPOC. We've supported this many new authors, debut authors this year, and it's still counting on one hand or two hands when I need, meaning me personally and for my readers, I need hundreds, I need thousands. I don't need a panel of 4 Asians in publishing. I need 400 interns who are all people of color or other marginalizations, right? And I just don't know how to shift from this one thing at a time. And I know we need to be patient. What I want is systemic change. So, what do you see for the future of your job, your firm, and children's publishing in general? I know that's a huge question, but do we have reason to hope, I guess is what I would say. Anybody want to jump in there with that?
I can jump in. So I was thinking about this a lot too, the idea of systemic change and what do I want to see different? How can we support BIPOC authors better? And something that, as an editor, that frustrates me on a daily basis when I'm trying to acquire a book is comps for P&Ls. If you don't know what a P&L is, it's a profit and loss statement, and something an editor has to put together when they're trying to acquire a book. It's basically how we go to our publisher and advocate for not only the book, but for the amount of money that we want in order to buy the book. And the biggest part of that is we use comp titles in order to say, well, this title sold this much, so we can anticipate that this title will sell this much. But there's an inherent racist structure to that because there are so few books by POC that it's hard to find comp titles that are successful for new BIPOC authors. And so it kind of becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy where the pool of successful books by BIPOC authors is so small that you don't have a wide array of comps to use. And then if a publisher then allows you to buy that book, they maybe won't put as many dollars in marketing and publicity because they don't anticipate that it'll sell well based on track records of other books that are not that book. And so it's a systemic cyclical thing that I just hope that we can, find a way around as we try to continue to support more stories and more diverse authors and their stories.
Wow, that's fascinating, Rebecca. Right. Yeah. I'm just, I'm already trying to think, okay, what's the workaround there? How do, anyone else have a vision for the future?
I can go. I think, and thankfully we're seeing this happen a lot. Probably one of the very few positives of the pandemic is that because everyone now realized we can all do our job remotely and it'll be fine. The industry won't collapse. That we can actually just invite more and more people who do not live in New York City to be trained properly in this job. And I think that especially if there are still unpaid internships, which I, obviously agree it should not happen anymore, ideally. They should not require you to move to New York City, figure out rent, figure out everything. I mean, that's just like completely unsustainable and unreasonable. And I feel like when I was first when I first sort of started in this job, I wasn't in New York, but I was in Connecticut. And even that was considered wild to lots of people. And for me, it was like, and I was just beginning to think of myself as being from Connecticut because I had just, I was in Chicago before that, then Boston, and then Pakistan. And I moved around all my life. And, I feel like I was constantly seeing all the same kinds of books on lists about, New Yorkers or kids growing up in Brooklyn, or the literary novel about the sad writer who lives in Brooklyn. I mean, these are all things we make fun of, but it's a reality that it's just like, it's because they all think that everybody, and I was thinking to myself, and I was like, these editors acquiring are all from these places, so they get excited by these stories. If we train people, invest in people who are from all over the world, and give them the skills to build their own lists, they're going to want to acquire stories that mirror their own lives also. Although, it's a separate issue that perhaps we shouldn't be so limited and just go towards stories that are about, our own backgrounds. But for those of us who've never seen that, it's obviously completely different, right? I feel like the ecosystem, the literary ecosystem has benefited so much. I can see just in the past few years where there are more agents and editors living outside of New York City, connecting with stories that perhaps wouldn't have, gotten that kind of attention before that. And, they're saying, people in the Midwest or people in the South or people in South America or in Asia are going to like the story, and not people who grew up in New York City. Like that was something that I was so gung-ho about when I was young. And, I feel like that's something that we need to, I hope, once this pandemic is over, knock on wood that it is over soon, we don't feel like we can go back to the office and forget about this big realization we all have that this job is not one that we have to be in the office for in New York City. It's just not, especially in the earlier phases where it's just so difficult, monetarily to make it in New York City. I feel like if we were to shift that paradigm a little, it would help diversify the industry, and it would also help diversify the stories that we bring in very much. At least
I think the corollary to that is, how do we use technology to be more inclusive? So DV Pitt, for example, that's what you're saying, but on, through a different angle, is that all of a sudden, you didn't have to go to these expensive conferences to make a connection to an editor and agent, right? And I know that a lot of our recent more inclusive books have come out of things like DV Pitt, and so certainly, those should continue as ways, as just as you're saying, Saba. Anybody else have a vision for the future that we can, that will inspire us?
I can go really quickly, or it'll be really short. For me, it's accessibility. This is my soapbox, but I think that when it comes to diversifying publishers in all departments, I think sometimes, not sometimes, publishers really kind of, when they choose their applicant pool, when they recruit new employees. They're really looking from like the same pool of universities. And for me, I always find that really limits the scope and who applies for jobs, who's seen for jobs, because I didn't have an Ivy League degree, I didn't have a fancy MFA, I didn't have all of those things that would traditionally, or what people perceive to be, well, if you want to be in publishing, you need to be, you need to go to the right university, know the right people. I think what will be really helpful for publishers really in the future is to not only just target universities, because, in order for someone to have a university, to go to university or to get a degree, there's also that financial barrier, but to also really target, students who go to community college, students who are really kind of just trying to figure out what it is they want out of life, what career opportunities are possible for them, and just widening the pool of applicants that way. I went to community college, I'm not ashamed to say that either. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I had no idea what I wanted to be. And I went to community college for 2 years and had, a publisher, had a representative come to my school and say, like, if you love stories, or if you love books, like, this is an opportunity. Who knows, where I would be now if I had started earlier, if I had known it was possible. But that's just mine.
Yeah, that's a very practical thing that can be done tomorrow, So Jenny, did you want to contribute?
Yeah, just sort of following up on what Saba and Deeba were saying, just opening more doors to marginalized people who can't afford to live here and don't really know the industry, don't really understand it. So I would say my piece would be, when we're doing that recruitment all across the country and at community colleges, really emphasize that there are just so many other avenues to publishing besides editorial. Marketing, publicity, design, sales, finance. There are so many different departments that make a book. And, all you really need is a love of books to really find your place in a publishing company, if that's what you want to do. And to just sort of emphasize that you don't need to be like, spelling everything right and being good at editing to work in publishing. There are just so many other jobs if you want to get involved. That's terrific. I've really gotten a lift from all of you. I really am feeling like, ready to go back to work again. So let's close out tonight with a very quick answer, hopefully, of the best advice you ever received for your job, for life in general, for it doesn't have to be publishing related, but just to leave us all with something to take with us. So I'll start this time. So this is for writers. I always feel overwhelmed when I start a project. Okay, I can't believe I've ever written a book before, because how do you do this? I don't know how to do this. So I always give myself a teeny tiny assignment. And by that, I mean 1 or 2 paragraphs. That's all I'm doing today. All I have to do is do 1 or 2 paragraphs. And then this is the crucial part. And I want them to be crap. Well, I specifically say to myself, I want you to write 1 or 2 terrible paragraphs today. And all of a sudden my brain goes, that I can do, not a problem. And so I'll write 1 or 2 really terrible paragraphs, because I'm either going to throw them away or I'm going to rewrite them 1 billion times. Right? But just to get rid of that feeling of I can't possibly do this, which I face every time I sit down. Okay, get a hold of yourself, teeny tiny task, and do it as badly as you possibly can. And it frees me up. So that's how I've written every single one of my books. So that's for the writers out there. I don't know if that will help anyone, but I hope it will. Best advice you've ever received, Saba?
I would say is that you get to define what being successful means for yourself.
Nice.
I think that at any point in any stage of life, including the ones we're all at now, there's so much pressure to, I guess, conform to what this golden standard of success may be for agenting or for editing or for whatever it is. And I mean, I think we all know that that standard doesn't exist. It's artificial, and it's easier said than done to define that success. But it's something I have to tell myself all the time. And I think for me, the big moment for me was when the year I started building my list as an agent, I also got pregnant. And so I was starting a family. I had a small child. Nobody was, going with me. I was just like, should I do this? Should I not? And when that happened, when Sarah signed with me, I was like, wow, I felt like I made it. I felt I am successful. And of course, I mean, anyone would laugh at me saying, wow, okay, you had one author say yes to you. You sold one book. What does that mean about you are being successful? But I will never forget how successful I felt in that moment. And I know I'm probably more successful in absolute terms now than I was then. But when I think about my life in this way of just, I did it. I made it. I'm wrangling 2 small children and a job and this life and pandemic. I'm badass. It's fine. So just tell yourself that when it's just like no one has your particular circumstances, so no one can know just how challenging life is for you. So you shouldn't feel bad or compare yourself to someone else because it's just they don't have those 2 small children. Anyway.
Don't let anyone else define success for you. Define it yourself. I think that's wonderful. Yeah, Deeba?
Best advice I'd ever received. I guess the advice would have been really that it gets better. Breaking into this industry, I work as an editor, but I also write. And, let me tell you, I don't advise doing both sides of the industry because you face a lot of rejection. And it's just really hard all around to manage your time. But really just kind of drilling into my head this idea that, it's hard right now, but like, I promise it gets better only if you stick around long enough to cross through this hard moment. Mm-hmm. I think in this industry, if you're looking to break in and, months can go by. In my own experience, years went by. I took a break from the industry because I just couldn't. I broke in and then they pushed me out and I couldn't break in again. And it was just so hard. I was like, what am I doing here? Like, why am I trying? It was really just this mantra of like, it's hard now. It'll get better. I just need to cross through this hard part. And just knowing that once you cross through the hard part, it's going to be worth it in the end. You just have to keep trying. And I really just, that's really for anyone who wants to, break in, to any industry. You can't give up, just because you don't get the job doesn't mean you failed because you didn't give up. You have to, if they push you down, you just get up.
Yeah. Very, very good for any field, as you say. So Jenny, you ever gotten a really great piece of advice you want to share?
Yeah, I think with publishing, especially, children's publishing, as an editor, you can really get caught up in certain things like making a P&L work. Like, what is your boss going to think about X? Like the gatekeepers out there, are they going to find something that they don't like about the book? Are we going to get on the New York Times bestseller list? Like, there's just so many outside influences that may help you define success for your book, that sometimes you kind of lose sight of the fact that these are for kids. Your readers are your most important audience. It really matters if you touch them when they're reading a book that you've edited, whether it's an infant or a 17-year-old who's going through things. It's just important to keep remembering that you're working on children's books and these words will shape them as they grow. So be good at that and don't worry so much about the New York Times list,
Fantastic. Yes. So, and Rebecca, take us home.
Okay. I think something someone once told me is that the phrase dream job shouldn't exist because no one should dream of labor. And that is something that I think about all the time, especially I think in publishing, we're told all the time that this is a passion industry, and that's why we put up with the long hours and the constant burnout and the not so great salaries, especially at the beginning. And this is not to say that like pretty much everyone who works in this industry, especially in kidlit, is very passionate about what we do. We love our books and we love our authors, but it is to say that I think that from really early on in your career, it's important to draw boundaries for yourself in terms of your own mental health and your own feelings of self-worth and what everyone's talking about, your own feelings of success. And so just remember that as much as we all love what we do, it's only a small part of what your life is and what your life should be, I think.
Oh, wonderful. That is wonderful to take us out on. So, well, thank you all so much. This was wonderful for me. And I hope to be able to thank you all in person one of these days. But until then, please stay safe and keep doing the amazing work that you're doing. And if ever you have a day where you're feeling a little low, please know that what you are doing really matters. It matters to me. And it matters, as Jenny said, to the kids who are our readers. So thank you all so much. And thank you again to the Asian Author Alliance for AAPI Heritage Month and running this series of wonderful panels and talks. Take care, everyone. Keep writing and keep reading.
Thank you for having us.